Battlefield 6 can easily be CPU limited on a lot of people's systems rather than GPU limited. And since in a lot of games people are used to being GPU limited in their performance, they might not quite understand the differences in how you deal with being CPU limited and how to even identify whether you're CPU or GPU limited, because it's something that's commonly misunderstood. I'm gonna show you guys a couple of ways to look at this. One is using in-game tools. Another is using like a third-party overlay like MSI Afterburner, which is what I'm running on the top left-hand side of the screen. By the way, some people have commented on my videos saying that they can't get the MSI Afterburner overlay working in Battlefield 6, and the key is to update to the latest version. I'm using the beta version on MSI's website, and that's been working for me on all my systems, whereas some older installs of Afterburner weren't showing up. So try downloading that latest beta version off of MSI's Afterburner page if needed. Now notice here that we can see a couple of things. First of all my CPU cores are being displayed, and they're pretty heavily utilized, although none of them actually says 100%, so some people don't understand that that means that they're actually still CPU limited. Your CPU doesn't always indicate 100% overall usage or even per core when it actually is CPU limited. Where you really want to look at is if your GPU is being fully utilized. So you can see under my GPU line, I'm showing, in the mid 50s% range. That's indicating that my GPU is waiting for something. Otherwise, the game would be sending it more frames and it would be more fully utilized in the upper 90% range. But actually, this game has a pretty cool tool that's built in that can also help you identify whether you're CPU or GPU limited. If you go to the graphics menu, you go to Advanced, Modify, Performance Overlay. I've set it to Simple right now, and you'll see in the top right-hand side corner of the screen here that, and now the text is a little bit small, so pinch and zoom if you're on mobile if you need to. You can see that it displays the CPU and GPU frames per second, but I actually want you to look over at the milliseconds line. Notice that my CPU milliseconds is around 11 or 12 milliseconds to compute a frame right now, whereas the GPU is reporting only about 6 milliseconds to compute a frame. That means the GPU is able to complete its work much quicker than the CPU, but you don't actually get your frame displayed until everything's finished. So we are not being held up by the GPU as far as our performance right now. Which means that a way that a lot of people are used to boosting their performance in a game, like kicking on upscaling, like maybe FSR performance mode, isn't actually going to help our performance go up, because notice that our GPU is now able to compute it even quicker, even fewer milliseconds, but the CPU is not able to compute things any quicker, because relieving the burden on the rendering resolution of the game, which is what DLSS and FSR and XeSS do, doesn't relieve the burden on the type of work that the CPU is calculating. So when you're CPU limited in a game, you need to focus on which graphics settings in the game actually improve the performance on the CPU side of things. So this is where this game actually makes it fairly easy on you, which is if you go into the graphics settings and go to modify, first of all, if you're on a basic preset like ultra or low or something like that, you'll notice you can't change these things, but if you scroll to the right to custom, you can now change them individually. Now, luckily, this game actually, when you mouse over each of these, tells you what it primarily impacts. Is it increasing the burden on the CPU, the GPU, or VRAM? Now, this is kind of a side note, but if you're on a lower VRAM capacity GPU, like 6 gigabytes or less, 8 gigabytes or less, somewhere around there, you might want to pay attention to these VRAM settings and try to make sure you give yourself some headroom. Now, I've put in a 4070 Super for the purposes of this video. It's nothing extremely fancy, but it is fairly modern and fairly powerful when paired with this CPU, which is a Ryzen 5 5600X, which is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU. This game can use a lot of cores and threads, which some games can't, which, again, just differences in the way different games work. Now here, again, I don't need to claw back any VRAM performance, and this is pretty low. Texture quality has a pretty low impact on the CPU and the GPU, but if we scroll down to texture filtering, that has a higher impact on the GPU, but we don't need more GPU performance, so I can leave texture quality and texture filtering up, whereas mesh quality, notice that this says it has a high burden on the CPU, the GPU, and the VRAM. So if I'm trying to claw back any CPU-related performance, now I'm getting killed in the background, so by the way, just keep in mind that as we test the performance here, we'll have to be careful about making claims of, A to B testing because different things can be happening in the environment. Even if I'm standing still, my teammates or the enemy teams can be doing different sorts of things. I should probably at least spawn into the game though. Let's go back into my headquarters so I'm more likely to be safe. Maybe run around a little bit so I don't know if the game kicks me for being inactive or something like that. But anyway, let's get back into the graphics menu a bit and take a look at these things. So again, sorry, wanted to go to the modify, so graphics, modify, here we go. So mesh quality is something we're going down to low, might increase my performance even when CPU limited. Looks like we're bouncing around 90 FPS right now. If I go down to low, looks like we went up to, 94 FPS or so. Again, it's hard to get the A/B testing because different things can be going on in the environment of the gameplay, but this is one where we can claw back some CPU performance. Now, notice terrain quality also has a CPU performance high, so I'm going to switch that one down to low. And yeah, terrain quality is not going to look as good, but overall performance should be going up a little bit again. Notice undergrowth quality, that's only medium on the CPU, high on the GPU though. Maybe I'll leave that one alone for now, but if you're desperate for any little bit of performance you can get, that might be another place you would look. Notice effects quality is a high effect on the CPU, so I'm going to switch that one down to low. Again, we might get a few more frames per second out of that. The idea is that by changing all of these in combination that are highly effective on the CPU, we'll in combination get back more than just each little one does individually. Volumetric quality, not big on the CPU. Lighting quality, not big on the CPU. Local light and shadows, though, that has a higher effect on the CPU, so I'm going to turn that one down to low. Sun shadow quality, high effect on the CPU. I'm going to go down to low on that one as well. Shadow filtering, not a big deal for the CPU. So the idea here is that when you're CPU limited, you can leave the graphics as good as possible by leaving up anything that doesn't have a big impact on the CPU, but get as much performance as you can by lowering the ones that are affecting the CPU more. So again, reflection quality, not a big deal. Screen space reflections, not a big deal. Post-processing quality, not a big deal. Screen space AO and GI, not a big deal on the CPU. High fidelity objects amount though, boom, high impact on CPU. So let's go ahead and switch that one down to low. So we've got a lot of things left up at their maximum values, but certain key ones like mesh quality, terrain quality, effects quality, local light and shadow quality, sun shadow quality, and our high fidelity objects amount are down at low now. So now let's go ahead and kind of see where we're at with performance. Now, as the game went on, it actually became more burdensome on the CPU compared to where we were at the beginning of the game. So now let's do a quick flip here. First of all, notice our CPU is absolutely pegged. We're at 100% utilization, which is pretty interesting. It looks like we're getting around 80 frames per second. It goes a little bit lower, it goes a little bit higher. Let's let that stabilize for a second. Because in a second, I'm gonna switch this back to Ultra and you'll see the change. So we're kind of bouncing around mid-70s at times, hits up to 80. Okay, let's switch this back to Ultra and check if things just instantly go way lower. Yeah, look, we're way down to in the mid-60s now. So in that quick flip between them, you can actually see how all of those things together ended up having a fairly significant impact on overall CPU performance. So that's the general idea in gaining back CPU performance and identifying if you're CPU limited. Again, typical ways of gaining performance, like decreasing the resolution rendering with things like DLSS and FSR, not going to be the way to go when you're CPU limited. You want to focus specifically on the graphics settings that specifically say they have a high impact on CPU. Now, the simplest thing to do is you can just turn everything down to low, and that will do everything all at once, and you'll probably get back even a little bit more performance compared to adjusting those settings individually. But the downside to doing this is that, some of those settings, by the way, required a restart. Notice the ones I did down on the CPU weren't giving us that flag. Anyway, the idea here, though, is that you've turned down some things that are just relieving the burden on the GPU and making the game look worse, but you didn't need to because the GPU was not the limiting factor. So that's the general idea to understand when you are CPU limited in a game, is that actually a lot of things you can leave up at their maximum values if they are primarily affecting the GPU, but you turn things down that are specifically affecting the CPU, and luckily this game makes that pretty easy. Just scroll through the graphics menu, identify those ones that are a high CPU burden, and away you go. Anyway, that's, I think, what I've got for you guys today on this CPU testing. And again, how to identify it. Like I said, if you're having issues with MSI Afterburner working, get the latest version. Are you guys interested in other testing in this game? I've already tested a bunch of GPUs in last weekend's open beta, so I don't know. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I hope you have an excellent day.